The IRS just activated a tracking system for your physical silver, and the deadline is February 17th, 2026. Most people believe physical silver is the ultimate off-the-grid asset, a private shield against the IRS, a way to exit the paper markets without surveillance. You see, the narrative says if you hold the metal in your hand, you're invisible to the system. The data says otherwise. The February 17th deadline isn't a new rule. It's a data harvesting mechanism for the 2026 reset, which means every ounce you thought was anonymous just became a tagged asset in a federal database. The math is clinical. The IRS General Instructions for 2025/2026 state that third-party settlement organizations must now report transactions exceeding $600. Not $20,000, $600. That threshold dropped by 97%, and your off-the-grid exit strategy dropped with it. Here's the plan. Today, I'm breaking down the three-stage trap hidden in the IRS Form 1099-B reporting shift. Why Stage 1 turns your bullion dealer into a federal informant. Why Stage 2 makes your vaulted silver a collateral target under UCC Article 8. And why Stage 3 connects directly to the $3 trillion maturity wall coming due in 2026. A mandatory protocol before we open the file. This is not financial advice. I'm not a licensed advisor. The math follows a script, but your capital is your responsibility. Always conduct your own research. Stage 1, the $600 trap. The IRS didn't announce this shift with a press conference. They buried it in the general instructions for certain information returns. Page 12, Section B. The language is surgical. Third-party settlement organizations, payment processors, bullion brokers, digital platforms are now required to issue Form 1099-B for any transaction exceeding $600 starting in the 2026 tax year. The old threshold was $20,000. You see, under the previous framework, you could sell $15,000 worth of silver eagles through a dealer and remain below the federal radar. That door just closed, which means your bullion dealer is no longer a merchant. They're a reporting agent. Every sale over $600 triggers a paper trail. Your name, your social security number, the exact ounce count, the transaction date. All of it gets forwarded to the IRS by February 17th, 2026. Plus, this isn't limited to physical exchanges. The rule applies to any settlement processed through a TPSO, PayPal, Venmo, Stripe, dealer payment portals. If the transaction touches a third-party processor and exceeds $600, the system captures it. The IRS isn't just watching the big players anymore. They're tracking your $600 exit from the physical market. The timing is the tell. February 17th, 2026 isn't random. It aligns with the corporate debt maturity wall. $3 trillion in investment grade and high-yield bonds coming due between 2025 and 2026. The system needs collateral, which means they need visibility on every hard asset still outside the digital grid. You see, when empires enter the late stage of a debt cycle, they don't collapse outright. They harvest. They locate assets. They reclassify ownership. And the first step in that process is always the same: mandatory reporting. The mechanism is already live. Dealers are required to furnish recipient statements by February 15th, 2026, and file with the IRS by March 31st, 2026. If you sold silver in 2025, thinking it was private, the math says otherwise. The record is already being compiled. Most people will ignore this $600 threshold and pay the price later. But if this specific mechanism just clicked for you, or you want to track these IRS protocol shifts as they happen in real time, join the Forensic Circle by hitting subscribe. Let's move to the deep dive. But even this $600 reporting trap is a distraction from the real mechanism hidden in the legal fine print. You see, the IRS can track your transaction, but they can't seize your metal unless you never actually owned it in the first place. And that's exactly what UCC Article 8 was designed to do. The Security Entitlement Trap. UCC Article 8, Part 5, contains a legal mechanism most silver holders have never read. The language is clinical, the implications are surgical. If you store your silver in a vault, allocated or unallocated, you do not own the metal. You own a security entitlement, which means you hold a contractual claim against the vault operator, not a direct property right to the specific bars in the storage facility. The Uniform Commercial Code defines this clearly. Under Section 8-501, a security entitlement is created when a securities intermediary credits a financial asset to a person's account. The vault becomes the intermediary. Your silver becomes the financial asset, and you become the entitlement holder. You see, the term allocated storage suggests you own specific bars with serial numbers assigned to your account. The legal reality is different. UCC Article 8, Section 8-503, states that an entitlement holder has a property interest in the financial asset, but it is not a claim to a specific identifiable thing. It is a pro rata property interest in all the assets held by the intermediary, which means your allocated silver is pooled, legally, Even if the vault shows you a serial number on a certificate, the UCC treats it as a proportional claim against the vault's total inventory, not as your private property. Plus, Section 8-511 introduces the critical override. If the securities intermediary has a security interest in the financial asset, or if a creditor of the intermediary obtains a lien, your entitlement is subordinate. The vault's creditors come first. Your claim comes second. The math is no longer theoretical. The $3 trillion collateral crisis. S&P Global released data in late 2024 showing corporate debt maturities jumping from $2 trillion in 2024 to nearly $3 trillion in 2026. Investment-grade bonds, high-yield debt, commercial real estate loans, all coming due within an 18-month window. The system doesn't have $3 trillion in liquid capital to refinance this debt, which means the banks and institutions holding these obligations will need collateral to secure emergency liquidity from the Federal Reserve or the Treasury. You see, this is where UCC Article 8 becomes the extraction tool. Under Section 8-512, a securities intermediary's creditor can execute against the pooled financial assets held by the intermediary if the intermediary defaults or enters a liquidity crisis. Your vaulted silver, legally classified as a security entitlement, becomes available collateral. The precedent is already written. The Brisbane G20 Summit in November 2014 produced a framework called the Financial Stability Board's Adequacy of Loss-Absorbing Capacity of Global Systemically Important Banks. The document states that in a crisis, unsecured creditors and depositors can be converted into equity or written down to recapitalize a failing institution. This is the legal foundation of bail-ins, which means if your vault operator is classified as a securities intermediary under UCC Article 8, and that intermediary has exposure to a systemically important bank, your silver can be legally reclassified as part of the intermediary's balance sheet during a liquidity event. The timeline converges in 2026, the debt matures, the collateral gap widens, and the legal framework to absorb private assets into the systemic rescue operation is already operational. The allocated illusion. Most precious metals dealers market allocated storage as full ownership. The brochures say your bars are segregated. The invoices list serial numbers. The language implies legal title. The UCC says otherwise. Section 8-502 defines when a person acquires a security entitlement. The trigger is not physical segregation. The trigger is when the securities intermediary credits the account. Once that credit occurs, the legal relationship shifts from bailment, where you retain ownership, to entitlement, where you hold a contractual interest. You see, bailment requires the vault to act purely as a custodian with no right to use, lend, or encumber your property. But UCC Article 8 allows securities intermediaries to rehypothecate financial assets, unless explicitly prohibited by contract. Which means unless your vault agreement includes a specific clause forbidding the use of your silver as collateral for the vault's own financing, the law permits it. Plus, Section 8-504 grants the intermediary the duty to maintain a sufficient quantity of the financial asset, but not the specific asset. The vault must hold enough silver to satisfy all entitlement holders on a pro rata basis. But if the vault hypothecates 50% of its inventory to secure a loan, and a liquidity crisis forces the lender to seize that collateral, you don't lose your entire position. You lose 50% pro rata. The math is mechanical. If the vault holds 10,000 ounces and you own 1,000 ounces, you hold a 10% entitlement. If a creditor seizes 5,000 ounces, your entitlement drops to 500 ounces. You still have a claim, but the claim is now against a depleted pool. The Dodd-Frank Override Title 2 of the Dodd-Frank Wall Street Reform and Consumer Protection Act introduced orderly liquidation authority. The mechanism allows the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation to take control of a failing financial institution and restructure its liabilities without a bankruptcy proceeding. Section 202 grants the FDIC the power to transfer assets and liabilities to a bridge entity. Section 204 allows the FDIC to treat similar creditors differently based on systemic risk considerations. Which means if your vault operator is connected to a systemically important institution, and that institution enters orderly liquidation, the FDIC can transfer your security entitlement to a bridge vault, haircut your claim, or subordinate it to senior creditors. You see, Dodd-Frank was designed to prevent taxpayer-funded bailouts. The solution was bail-ins. Creditors absorb losses. And under UCC Article 8, entitlement holders are creditors, not owners. The Cyprus model from March 2013 is the test case. The Cypriot government and the European Central Bank restructured two failing banks by converting uninsured deposits into equity. Depositors with balances above 100,000 euros lost 47.5% of their capital. The legal justification was simple. Deposits are liabilities of the bank, not the property of the depositor. Which means if you hold a security entitlement in a vaulted silver account, and that vault is classified as a financial intermediary under Dodd-Frank Title II, your silver is legally a liability of the vault, not your private property. The framework is operational. The precedent is established, and the 2026 maturity wall provides the catalyst, the self-custody gap. The only exemption from UCC Article 8 is physical possession. If the silver never enters a securities intermediary's account, it remains private property under traditional bailment or outright ownership, which means the metal must be in your hand, not in a vault, not in an allocated account, not in a depository with a certificate of ownership, in your physical possession. You see, this is why the IRS $600 reporting threshold matters. The system can't seize what it can't locate, but once you sell, the transaction is reported. The vault is disclosed, and the entitlement structure is revealed. The math is binary. Either you hold the metal outside the intermediary system, or you hold a contractual claim inside a legal framework designed to absorb private assets during a systemic crisis. The deadline is February 17th, 2026. The maturity wall is $3 trillion, and the UCC Article 8 mechanism is already written into the fine print of every allocated storage agreement in the country. But even this entitlement trap is only stage 2 of the script. You see, the system has used this exact playbook before. 1933, Executive Order 6102, and the precedent it set is about to repeat in 2026. Part 3, Context and History. The 1933 Precedent Executive Order 6102 was signed on April 5th, 1933. The order criminalized the private ownership of gold. Citizens had until May 1st to surrender their gold coins, bars, and certificates to the Federal Reserve. The penalty for noncompliance was a $10,000 fine, or 10 years in prison, or both. The math was mechanical. The United States was on a gold standard. The Federal Reserve needed to expand the money supply to counter deflation. But under the gold standard, every dollar had to be backed by physical gold in the vault, which means the Fed couldn't print without gold reserves. The solution was confiscation. Remove gold from private hands, concentrate it in federal vaults, then devalue the dollar against gold to create monetary expansion room. You see, on January 30th, 1934, President Roosevelt signed the Gold Reserve Act. The law revalued gold from $20.67 per ounce to $35 per ounce, a 69% devaluation of the dollar overnight. The citizens who surrendered their gold at $20.67 watched the government revalue it to $35 the next day. The Treasury captured the difference, which means Executive Order 6102 wasn't about hoarding. It was about resetting the monetary system by transferring private wealth into public reserves. Plus, Roosevelt bypassed Congress entirely. He used the Trading with the Enemy Act of 1917, a wartime statute, to justify emergency powers during peacetime. The precedent was set. Financial emergencies grant the executive branch unilateral authority to seize private assets. The 1934 Silver Extension Executive Order 6814 followed on August 9, 1934. The order nationalized silver. It required all silver bullion located in the continental United States to be delivered to the U.S. Mint. Exemptions were limited to industrial users, rare coins, and amounts under 5 ounces. The Treasury paid 50 cents and 56 cents per ounce. The market price at the time was 45 cents. But just like gold, the government revalued silver upward after confiscation to $1.29 per ounce through the Silver Purchase Act of 1934. The pattern is identical. Confiscate at the low price, revalue at the high price, capture the spread. You see, the 1933 and 1934 orders were not about protecting the economy. They were about managing a debt spiral. The U.S. debt-to-GDP ratio had spiked during the Great Depression. The Federal Reserve needed monetary flexibility, and the gold and silver standards were the constraint, which means the system removed the constraint by removing private ownership of the metals that backed the currency. The legal framework survived. The Trading with the Enemy Act is still operational. The precedent of emergency confiscation is still cited in financial law textbooks. And the UCC Article 8 mechanism provides the modern equivalent without needing an executive order. The 7-stage collapse pattern. Empires don't collapse randomly. They follow a script. The cycle has 7 stages. The math is historical. Stage 1, monetary expansion. The empire prints money to fund wars, infrastructure, or social programs beyond its tax base. Stage 2, asset bubbles. The newly printed money flows into real estate, stocks, and speculative assets. Wealth concentrates in the top 10%. Stage 3, wealth gap explosion. The middle class is priced out of asset ownership. Social tension rises. Stage 4, fiscal dominance. The cost of servicing debt exceeds the ability to raise taxes. The central bank becomes the primary buyer of government bonds. Stage 5, loss of reserve status. Foreign creditors begin dumping the empire's currency. Trade partners establish alternative settlement systems. Stage 6, hyperinflation or deflationary spiral. The empire either prints to infinity or collapses under debt deflation. Stage 7, reset or revolution. The system either restructures through a monetary reset or collapses into political fragmentation. You see, this pattern destroyed the Spanish Empire in the 1590s. Spain imported massive amounts of gold and silver from the Americas. The influx caused domestic inflation. The cost of goods rose faster than wages. The wealth gap exploded. Spain debased its currency 4 times between 1596 and 1680. By 1700, Spain was no longer a global power, which means the pattern repeated with the British Empire. Britain ran a massive trade deficit after World War I. The pound was overvalued. The gold standard became unsustainable. Britain left the gold standard in 1931. By 1945, the British Empire was bankrupt, and the dollar replaced the pound as the world's reserve currency. Plus, the Soviet Union followed the same script. The USSR printed rubles to fund the arms race and subsidize Eastern Europe. The debt burden became unsustainable. By 1989, the ruble collapsed. The Soviet Union dissolved in 1991. The United States is at stage 5. The 2026 reset convergence. The U.S. national debt is $36 trillion. The debt to GDP ratio is 123%. The cost of servicing the debt in 2024 was $892 billion. That number will exceed $1 trillion in 2025, which means the U.S. government now spends more on interest payments than on defense. You see, this is the definition of fiscal dominance. The Federal Reserve can't raise interest rates without collapsing the Treasury's budget. And the Fed can't lower rates without triggering inflation. The system is trapped. Plus, the BRICS bloc, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, announced a gold-backed settlement system in August 2023. The system is designed to bypass the dollar in cross-border trade. Saudi Arabia is negotiating yuan-based oil contracts. The petrodollar, established in 1974, is being dismantled. The reserve currency is losing reserve status. The timeline points to 2026, the $3 trillion corporate debt maturity wall. The IRS February 17th reporting deadline. The BRICS settlement system launch scheduled for mid-2026. The cycles are converging. You see, 1933 wasn't about saving the economy. It was about resetting the monetary system to buy another 40 years of dollar dominance. 2026 isn't about protecting depositors or entitlement holders. It's about resetting the system to extend the debt cycle for another generation. The mechanism is different. 1933 used executive orders. 2026 uses UCC Article 8, Dodd-Frank Title II, and IRS reporting protocols. But the script is the same. Confiscate the hard assets, restructure the liabilities, revalue the currency, capture the spread. The math has repeated 7 times across 7 empires. Spain, Britain, the Soviet Union. The script doesn't change. Only the legal fine print updates. And the final trap hidden in that fine print is the one mechanism most silver holders will never see coming until it's already over. The forensic circle. Most people will ignore this February 17th, 2026 deadline and pay the price. They'll assume their allocated silver is safe because the vault sent them a certificate with a serial number. They'll believe the IRS $600 threshold does not apply to them because they only sell occasionally. And they'll never read UCC Article 8. Part 5. Until a liquidity crisis converts their security entitlement into a pro rata claim against a depleted pool. But if you refuse to be a victim of the script, join the forensic circle. Subscribe. We don't rely on official narratives. We read the fine print, we track the legal mechanisms, and we map the timeline before the deadline hits. Plus, the 2026 reset isn't limited to silver. Dodd-Frank Title II contains a bail-in framework that applies to deposits, bonds, and brokerage accounts. I'm writing a full autopsy on that mechanism right now. The math is surgical. The precedent is Cyprus, 2013. And the trigger is the same $3 trillion maturity wall. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss the reveal when it drops. The fortune cookie. The system isn't broken, it's operating exactly as designed. Empires in stage 5 don't collapse outright. They harvest. They locate private assets, they reclassify ownership. And they execute the reset through legal frameworks most people never read. Executive Order 6102 set the precedent in 1933. UCC Article 8 provides the mechanism in 2026. The math is no longer sustainable. The date is set. Your only protection is understanding the mechanics of the trap. The file is now open. The clock is ticking. And the February 17th deadline is 186 days away.